Jason Bermas, joined by Rosalind Peterson of CaliforniaSkywatch.com. If you've got photos or videos of persistent jet contrails, of tree degradation, or documents pertaining to geoengineering, that's where you want to go to submit those articles. She's got a plethora of information already. And I wanted to go over that large document that we got printed in pieces. But basically, it shows all these separate flight paths. It shows military flights. It shows commercial flights. It shows 404 total flights. But then we have these mystery flights that kind of go off to the coast and circle around. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. What you're looking at is the documents that I got from Congressman Mike Thompson. He's our congressman in Northern California here. And Congressman Thompson, back in October 2003, wrote a letter, which I sent to you just now, a copy of the letter we got with these documents. And what happened with these documents is they're FAA flight paths of airplanes arriving and leaving San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose airports. And they're heading north over Mendocino and Lake counties. And what is interesting about this information that I requested from him is that I wanted to know how many flights were flying over Mendocino County and Lake County on any given day. And so each line on the maps that I gave you represents one flight. So what happened is when I got the flight maps, I realized that very few flights were occurring over Mendocino County. So therefore, to say that jet traffic was what was causing the amount of persistent jet contrails over Mendocino County was not the airline traffic and their flight routes, because we very seldom would see persistent jet contrails from the flight routes that these planes take almost every day. What we were seeing is intraflights of planes that weren't taking off or landing from the major airports like San Francisco, Oakland, or San Jose. We were seeing flights that were coming in from longer distances and that would loop the loop over us or out over the Pacific Ocean and then fly back in. And you could see the X's and the loops that they were performing on the map. You can actually look at the flights. And these are the flights that we were seeing and still see over Mendocino County that go in every direction, circle our county constantly, and put us in a maze of persistent jet contrails and man-made clouds. And these maps that I provided for you are maps that are actual FAA maps from Congressman Thompson. So I was able to separate out all of the flights that were going in the wrong direction. And there's no flights that go east-west over our county except for the what they call intra-flights. And so this led me to believe that the majority of the contrails and the sky whiting out and the white haze from the jets we were seeing, they weren't flying in the normal flight paths of FAA commercial airlines.
And these documents are from 2003. When did you get into this? I think it was in 2002, you've told me. And how did you get into this subject matter?
Well, in 2002, it came to my attention from a friend of mine that there was something going on in the skies, and he directed me to look up one day when the jets were really bad over our county. And I started to really pay attention to how the planes were leaving these contrails, which persisted and turned into huge plumes and haze and these man-made clouds. And from that day forward, April 27th, 2002, I started to do a lot of research to find out exactly what I could find out about this and what was happening.
And it's been a really long road. I mean, you started just kind of as a citizen activist and ended up speaking in front of the United Nations. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yes. I started to study the problems with persistent jet contrails, having them turn into man-made clouds that were exacerbating global warming, changing our climate, and negatively impacting natural resources. And I really started to look at the NASA studies and other university studies on this subject. And when I began to feel that they were really going to impact human health, agriculture, crop production from the man-made clouds, stopping the photosynthesis process from working as well as it should, that means direct sunlight hitting the earth, I began to think and began to speak out in many places. And at this point, a woman called me from Connecticut and came to visit, and then asked me if I would like to speak at the United Nations Conference on Climate Change in 2007. And so I received an invitation to be a keynote speaker and to also speak on a panel at the United Nations on this topic. And so for the first time, many people got to see pictures of these huge contrails and hear discussed the impacts that they were having on our climate and about how they were warming us up at night especially, and how they were impacting our natural resources. So it was a huge introduction for most people who didn't know anything about it.
And let's kind of bring it back to that introduction. What is so different from these, persistent jet contrails that we didn't see growing up, where, you'd see kind of like this small contrail following the plane and then dissipating as it moved forward?
Growing up in Mendocino County, I never saw any kind of contrails. In other words, this was a phenomenon that, as far as I know, didn't take place over the county, and I was born and raised on a working farm. We were outside all the time. And I don't remember seeing any, even the ones that persist for only a few seconds or a minute and then disappear. And so this was something I asked my mother, who at the time was in her late 80s, if she'd ever seen anything like it, and she said no, she hadn't either. So I went back and I researched old photographs, historical photographs in Mendocino County, Lake County, and a few other counties, and could not find any type of jet contrail that would persist prior to 1989.
So 1989, why that year, do you think? Well, why do you think that 89? I mean, are there any documents that have led you to believe that this is when, a certain program started or anything like that?
No, the only thing that led me to believe that there was a change is when a military colonel told me that they had changed jet fuel from JP4 to JP8 and then put some additives in it. And he told me that happened around 1988, 1989 to military airplanes when they switched over to this jet fuel. And subsequently, the configuration of the jet engine also changed about that time, which meant that those changes could have allowed, in other words, other types of things to happen besides just releasing of jet fuel emissions and water vapor and ice crystals. So I don't know, but there was a change about that time. Now, people have talked about contrails dating back to 1919, but I want to be clear that there were no jet airplanes flying prior to World War II, and there was only a handful of German and French planes. No American jet engines were flying until in the United States until after World War II was over. So and most of the planes were prop engines. So I'm separating myself out from smoke and prop engines to just talk about jet engines, because this is when the change really began to take place, I think.
Now, you mentioned additives before when they changed from a J4 to a J8. Do we know what these additives are?
No, because the military considers them classified. The additives are classified. And we know more about the additives of the commercial JP4, but we don't know what the additives into JP8 are or JP10. There's a whole range of different fuels that are being used in military aircraft. And so we don't know exactly what's in them because they keep it highly classified, although we do know that there's reason to believe that they're highly toxic, just as jet fuel emissions are for any commercial airplane that uses JP4.
Now, you've also been able to acquire documents that sample the water and the air from your area. And what have you found with those?
The air samples are from the California Air Resources Board, and the water samples are from the California State Department of Health Drinking Water Division in Sacramento, California. So I'm not using any water test results or other results that I took myself personally. All of the data and the data that I have provided are directly from the state tests, either taken, in other words, by the California Air Resources Board, or were given to the California State Department of Health by drinking water, in other words, districts and people who use wells for drinking water purposes. So the data has shown that there are unusual spikes in aluminum, barium, manganese, magnesium, calcium, arsenic,